And now, for our main program, we will have past President Laura Rearman introduce our main program. But before I turn the mic over to her, let me say a few things about Laura. So many of you know that Laura had an illustrious career in healthcare, retiring as head of Growth Help Foundation. But did you know she's a woman of many talents? Laura rode horseback over the Continental Divide on a 90-mile trip in the Bob Marshall Wilderness this summer. Yes. Also, past President Paul Ishii taught her fly fishing last year. She passed with flying colors, so check this out. She fell into the river, caught a tree, and then caught a fish. And then the last fun fact about Laura, she got to spend the day riding in a limousine with Cary Grant when he visited Seattle, and she was working for Doug Pica at the Rotary Club at the time. So please help me welcome to the podium, Laura Rearman.
Thank you very much. And now to the really serious presentation by Dr. Thayne McCulloh. In 1887, Gonzaga University opened its doors to 7 full-time students. Today, 7,500 students are enrolled in undergraduate and graduate programs, including law and medicine. Dr. Thayne McCulloh is the 26th president of the university and the first non-Jesuit to lead this Jesuit, Catholic, and humanistic education that describes Gonzaga U. He earned his doctorate in psychology from Oxford University in England. His leadership skills were evident very early as he served on the student government at Gonzaga alongside our own president, Cindy Runger. For 20 years, Gonzaga has ranked among the top 4 regional universities in the West and among the best regional universities in the country by U.S. News and World Reports. Some stats are on your table. 93% of its graduates are employed or pursuing higher education. 98 to 99% of the students are on scholarships and/or grants, and the average class size is 24. In 2016, the shortage of primary care physicians, primarily in our rural areas, prompted Gonzaga and the University of Washington to create the Regional Health Partnership. Gonzaga is the first private university institution to join the UW School of Medicine as a full partner. 60 students are enrolled on the Gonzaga campus for the first 18 months of their medical school training, and they finish up here at the UW. Gonzaga is one of 10 private nonprofit colleges and universities identified as the Independent Colleges of Washington. Together, these institutions graduate 21% of Washington's bachelor's and advanced degrees. Together, they complete the network of public and private colleges and universities serving our students in Washington State. Oh, one more thing you should know about Gonzaga. They have a pretty good basketball program. Dr. Thayne McCulloh.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much for that introduction, Laura. Thank you, and it's great to be here with all of you, and it's great to be with so many wonderful friends here in Seattle. I especially do want to acknowledge your president, Cindy Runger, who is probably the person in the room that I've known the longest, who's here. Thank you for your leadership and for the invitation to speak here today. And I also want to give a quick shout out to my friend Jen Porto, Seattle attorney and great Zag fan, somebody I've also had the privilege of knowing for a long, long time. Of course, Father Steve Sundborg and I have known one another a long time, and I'm grateful to you, Steve, for your invocation today, but also for the collegial relationship that we enjoy as sister institutions of the Jesuits. And I want to thank, too, the members of the ICW board who are here. And also joining as special guests today are some members of the Board of Trustees of Gonzaga. A fair number of our trustees are Seattle-based trustees, and among them is the chair of our board, Paul Brasich, who is here today. So thank you, Paul, for being here, and thank you to my fellow colleagues on the board. As Laura indicated in her her bio introduction of me, I have been at Gonzaga for some time. I was actually born in Los Angeles, California, but after a period of time, my family moved right here to Seattle, Washington. We moved here in 1974, and this is the city in which I completed my secondary education. But I should share with you that while I attended Blanchette High School, for high school, I actually did not complete my high school degree there. And this is an important part of the narrative for me and part of the presentation as well. I actually was dismissed from Blanchette High School. And I finished up at an alternative high school in Seattle, one for ne'er-do-wells of all kinds. And I will share with you that part of the reason that's important is that none of this was Blanchette's fault. I grew up in a challenging environment, a challenging family environment, and it is actually the case that I am one of those people who definitively falls in the category of those who did not enjoy and do not look fondly on high school. So when I share with when I share with our students that it's okay not to like high school, I can absolutely testify to my own experience of that. But I will tell you that in all seriousness, there was even a point in my late teens where I myself was homeless here in Seattle. And during that period of struggle, I eventually and ultimately turned to the U.S. Army. And I enlisted in the Army after a year out of my high schooling. And that proved to be one of the most significant and formative experiences of my life. I barely made it through basic. Believe it or not, I weighed about 150 pounds. I was a scrawny kid. I did not have a beard. And I barely made it through basic, but by 3 years later, I left active duty and went into the reserves as an E5 sergeant. And my specialty, my MOS, was 94, which is food service. So if you need something to eat later, I can hook you up. No, the military actually taught me one very important lesson, and that had to do with the virtually unlimited potential of the human spirit. There are individuals every day in this country who are in their late teens and early 20s that are doing incredible things. And they're serving our country in ways that people can barely imagine, repairing all kinds of complex equipment, flying equipment, doing all kinds of work that is not acknowledged. But my experience of that was truly a redemptive one. And then following that experience, I was admitted to Gonzaga University, and that too proved to be another formative experience in my own life. So I want to talk with you today just a little bit about Gonzaga University, which I also refer to occasionally as the little engine that could. Because Gonzaga University started 130 plus years ago as a scrappy little school in a scrappy little town. And this is a photograph of the turn of the century Spokane, Washington, dominated as it was then by the Spokane Falls on the traditional tribal lands of the Spokane tribe of Indians. And it for many, many years was framed and informed by an existence and an experience of partnership with a town that itself was finding its way and growing slowly but steadily at the crossroads of industry, railroad, mining, and agriculture. This was the very first building at Gonzaga University, created and opened in 1887. And that building was moved once, a fair distance, and then burned. I'm having trouble advancing this. Oh, there, and then we built a second building to replace the old one. And this is our tradition at Gonzaga. We don't just build something when something burns down, we build something bigger and better. So In 1898, this facility was opened, and lots of stories expanded about 10 years later. And this is a little video of Gonzaga today. There's music. Maybe the music doesn't work. I want to tell you, back in 2013, Gonzaga University celebrated its 125th anniversary. And that was the first year that Gonzaga University was ranked #1 in the country for men's basketball in its history. I got a call from the Washington, oh, now it's too loud. I got a call from the Washington Post. They wanted to interview me about what it meant to be ranked #1. And then she immediately said, but this article really isn't about you. This is about Butler. I said, well, why are you calling me? They said, well, we want a reference to a school that's really doing well in basketball. I said, I tell you this, at the end of our interview, you're going to wish this was an article about Gonzaga University. And you know what? 45 minutes later, that's exactly what she said. Gonzaga University has celebrated 20 straight appearances in the NCAA tournament, and it's set to visit it one more time here the 21st. But Gonzaga University was founded by an intrepid, diminutive Italian Jesuit by the name of Joseph Cataldo, and I'll tell you, from those humble beginnings through 2 world wars, it has become a gem, we hope, in the Pacific Northwest, and an important institution in the West as well. Like most institutions through the 20th century, schools were created and programs were founded in response to the needs of the locale, the state, and the region. Beginning in 1990, under then-President Bernard Coughlin, Gonzaga took a deliberate step in the direction of increasing the quality of its offerings and also its student admissions. But in the face of enrollment declines in 1998, his successor, Father Robert Spitzer, began to focus on the question of affordability. And over the last 20 years, Gonzaga has tripled in size, largely by becoming a more affordable institution, even as it has continued to become a better institution. It's now ranked 4th best university in the West. It is ranked #1 in undergraduate teaching by a U.S. News and World Report. It has the #1 ranked female collegiate tennis player in the country, Sophie Whittle. And it's spread across now 150 acres within 15 minutes walk of downtown. And today, we continue to build. This video was shot merely 2 years ago, and there are already facilities that are not included in the video that are featured and highlighted here. So I'm going to advance this with a little bit of help. This is an example of a facility that we actually opened 3.5 years ago. This one is the Performing Arts Center that's currently under construction, but will open in about a month's time. And I wouldn't be doing my job on behalf of the city of Spokane if I didn't give you a few shots of Spokane, Washington as well, because sometimes people wonder what Spokane looks like when they live on this side of the mountains. And there's one thing that really attracts a particular population to Spokane. It's called water. People from California are coming to Spokane at a very, very fast rate. Now, we need a new battery in our clicker, sir. Can you advance that? Okay, Spokane, Washington, and then we'll give you a couple more shots. This is a classic, iconic shot of St. Aloysius Church at Gonzaga University, and this is the site of a up-and-coming facility to advance engineering and sciences, an integrated engineering and sciences facility that we hope to break ground on here in the next 12 to 18 months. And then I think there's one more. No, that's not it. That's it. The windows on the second floor that face outwards towards you, that's my office. So this is the view from my office in the fall in Spokane. And I want to make sure that I do invite all of you over to Spokane, and in particular Gonzaga University, if there's a chance for you to come see it, because we'd like to show you what we're doing over there. Sometimes people ask me what the secret sauce involved with doing the work that Gonzaga has been up to is, and indeed many of the institutions that are represented by the independent colleges of Washington. And I think there's 4 critical ingredients for us at Gonzaga. First, there is a spirit of scrappy tenacity that has existed at the institution throughout its history. There is abundant faith in God, in the Creator, but there's also a very important and significant ingredient that's often missed, and that is the power of true community, community involved with accountability, and a constant striving for excellence. Spokane, Washington has long had what I refer to on this side of the mountains as an inferiority complex. Gonzaga University took on that patina itself as an institution. But during this modern era, we have shaken that off. Well, we have decided that Gonzaga University needs to be one of the excellent higher ed institutions in the country. And we're proud of our relationship with the Pacific Northwest, an important part of the building and creating of that story. Today at Gonzaga, we use terms like exemplary and excellence and leadership and service, values that are in common with Rotary. We are at the center now of a powerful regional healthcare, education, and delivery enterprise. But I need to ask you one question. Which do you think contains the most Hall of Fame members from Gonzaga? The Pro Football Hall of Fame or the NBA? If you think it's football, you'd be right. We have 2. And we only have 1 in the NBA, but we're going to change that shortly, I assure you. But I also want to share with you that there has been a paradigm shift in American higher education. This isn't the first paradigm shift in the modern era of higher education. The first paradigm shift actually occurred in the late 1800s, when a group of leaders of higher education in the country came together and said, you know what, we need to evolve and change because we are no longer an agrarian society. We are now past and into the industrial era. Well, the era of the information age has also affected us in a similar paradigmatic way. But the need for, and in fact the value of a college degree, in our view, is in fact incredibly more important today than it ever has been. The power of a university education is that it both teaches you about the thinking process, critical reasoning, analytical capabilities, expressive and relational skills. But it's also that our universities are paying attention to where the culture is calling us. How do we remain relevant from a program perspective, while at the same time looking at the question of what it is that students need to survive and to thrive in the world that now awaits them, a very different world than the world that awaited them 10, 20, or 30 years ago. Why does or should Gonzaga University matter to Seattle? Well, like me, a vast number of Gonzaga University graduates are from here. Gonzaga has deep Seattle roots and connections, and as the card at your place, which I personally created and toted over here on Horizon Airlines today, indicates there are significant numbers of Gonzaga graduates who return or move to the Seattle area to undertake their professions or their advanced degrees. 43% of Gonzaga students come from the state of Washington, and the vast majority of them are from King, Pierce, Snohomish counties. But most important, we have values in common. Leadership and service for the common good translate and become meaningful only when they are expressed in terms of action and impact. The independent colleges of Washington are an important part of the higher education offerings of the state. Gonzaga is one of 10 that together educate 40,000 students a year, which is 7% of the total higher education enrollment in the state. Yet the 10 together graduate 21% of the state's bachelor's and advanced degrees. The combined undergraduate graduation rate of the 10 is 82.8%, the fifth highest rate by state in the country. Gonzaga's is 87%. The national public rate of graduation is 65, and the national private rate is 76. By 2023, the state projects that 70% of the jobs in the state of Washington will require the mastery level in education of at least a post-secondary degree. But today, only 52% of Washingtonians hold such a degree. From an economic perspective, higher education is vital to the future welfare of individuals, of industry, and of the state. And the independent colleges like Gonzaga are prepared to continue playing a key part of that agenda. We're grateful for the governor and for the legislature who have continued to create support for financial aid programs like the Washington Promise Scholarship, but the only way that independent colleges like Gonzaga, Seattle U, and our other colleagues of the independent sector will survive is with the support of the citizens of the state. We hope that you will continue to pay attention to us on and off the court. We look forward to inviting you to Spokane and to Gonzaga University, and I thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. We have time for Q&A. Okay. Does anybody have questions about Gonzaga University or Spokane or food service?
Yes. This club has a lot of interest internationally, and I'm wondering if you could speak to the international dimension of your education.
Yes, I would be happy to do that in a couple of different expressions. International education. First of all, I am the president of an Italian company, Immobiliare Gonzaga, SRL, which is the holding company of our campus in Florence, Italy. We own and operate a school and have done so for almost 55 years in Florence. That is our Keystone International Education Project. But at this point in time, about 55% of our undergraduate students study abroad at one point or another during their time at Gonzaga, many of them for a semester, some of them for longer. And many of those programs now are a hybrid of formal education in the traditional sense and service learning. So we have a number of different projects around the world. Most recently, we have developed several sites in Zambia, Sub-Saharan Africa. Each of those 3 sites has a very different focus academically, but each of those sites is involved with service to the local community as the students are learning on site with faculty. So our international efforts are largely expressed through the undergraduate program, but we also do have partnerships with a number of international universities at the graduate level that are involved with delivery of program, particularly to those who we refer to as on the margins of their society. So we are involved with Jesuit Worldwide Learning, a project of the Society of Jesus internationally to deliver education in refugee camps, particularly in Africa. So those are some examples of some of our international effort. There was a question back here.
Dr. McCulloh, a few of us have observed that There's a lot of divisiveness going on in America these days, and among the things that were under attack is free speech.
Yes.
And I would wonder your approach of Gonzaga towards inviting citizens of both liberal and conservative issues to speak on your campus.
You bet. Yeah, this is an issue, I think, at both private and public institutions, the question of free speech and the relationship between speaking specifically about mission-based institution, what you might refer to as mission-based values. This is a constant tension that exists when it comes to trying to deliberate between a question of open access to ideas and demonstrated fidelity to the professed values of your mission. Gonzaga University leans in the direction of free expression because we believe that it's important for our students to have the opportunity to think for themselves. And if you look across the array of speakers that are invited to campus, you will find that we have individuals who are representative in actually fairly balanced measure of political perspective, multiple faith perspectives, and sometimes there are individuals who come and are invited because they have adopted positions on issues that can be difficult for people to understand or to accept. We have recently had a situation that relates directly to your question in the invitation of a speaker by members of the College Republicans Club on our campus. And the details always get kind of lost in the public narrative. But the question of who the speaker is, what the speaker intends to speak about, and what issues may attend to their appearance are always relevant for a college campus. In this particular case, the question had to do with whether or not the facility within which the speaker was asked to appear could be properly secured given the profile that the speaker enjoys. So in working with the College Republicans, the question became not whether or not he could come, but rather where we could have the event. And so that's generally the way that we tend to deal with issues when there's complexity. We tend not to look at it as a yes-no issue, but rather a how can we issue. And I think Gonzaga has been working quite hard within our community to try to bring a diversity of thoughts and perspectives in a way that maybe is a little bit of a departure from some of our historical trends. But that's our perspective. We think it's important as a community where we have still a large number of students, for example, who are Roman Catholic, but we have a large number of students who are from other faith traditions and no faith tradition at all, that we have an openness to difference and different perspectives as an important component of our educational offerings.
I'm Mark Wright. My son Brandon is going to graduate in May from your university, and I've been really impressed with you from the very first orientation. My question has to do with athletics and the role of athletics in developing a university. Now, I'm guessing more than a few schools around the country look at you and your university and say, how can we do that? But it's a balance, right?
Absolutely.
You look around Gonzaga and there are new buildings, the new sports complex is opening up. What's your advice? I mean, how do you manage that? Because you don't want to go all the way athletics. And so what's your perspective on that?
It's a good question, and it's a very complex reality. There's no question whatsoever in our view that athletics, and specifically basketball, have allowed us to enjoy a greater degree of visibility than we ever possibly could have afforded through a traditional kind of marketing perspective. But we have been trying to pay very close attention to especially the proportion of resources that are dedicated to athletics relative to the rest of the institution. When we have been building facilities, for example, we've demanded that the full cost of those facilities be covered by benefaction in athletics. That's something that we can barely afford to do in any other type of facility, but in athletics with high-profile support, there's a possibility of doing that. So our indoor tennis and golf facility, for example, that was completed in 2013 was fully funded by benefaction. So we try to perhaps place different criteria that are particularly benefactor supported or alternative revenue supported when it comes to athletics relative to the other programs. Otherwise, it would be unaffordable. One quick note to that, when we went to the national tournament, I'm sure that in the minds of the public, we were in a situation where people thought that media was probably paying us tons of money. The university received no funding whatsoever for that appearance, not even from the NCAA. So we actually had a liability. So I just want you to know that it's an important question. We continue to work on that.
One last question. One last question.
One last question.
One last question.
In 1 minute, can you tell us what keeps you up at night? It sounds pretty amazing, but something's got to stress you out. You got 60 seconds. Go.
Preparing for Rotary. The thing that keeps, I think, every college or university president up at night is, what is it that I do not know that I should know? That question. So we work really, really hard at creating the kinds of systems and processes and organizational structures that will allow us to understand what's happening inside our institutions, because they are high profile and people do care about what happens at them. So thank you so much.